Hi, everyone. Welcome to our SHEspeaks series on ideation with Doreen Lorenzo. We're so excited to have you here. I know everyone's a little bit Zoom fatigued, so really value your time, and we think this is going to be a great session. My name is Dina Ho. I'm director of the Launchpad at UT Austin. I'll talk a little bit more about that later and what we do. But again, we're so excited to have you here. And this is such a perfect intimate size. So feel free to ask questions, whether you want to unmute yourself or drop in the chat. Definitely engage and take this really unique opportunity. I think that's just like one of the best things about like a small Zoom is you get to meet people from so many different parts of campus you normally wouldn't get to, and it's still an intimate conversation. All right, so what is a Kendra Scott WEL Institute? Eva, tell us, and I can run your slides.
Awesome. And I'm just to clarify, is anyone
Yes.
else seeing these gray boxes over your presentation?
Oh no. Okay.
There you go. Okay.
My Zoom does that, and it's like on and off, but it's not a big deal. We'll move through these slides pretty fast.
That's a lot better.
Okay.
So yeah, hi everyone. I'm Eva Tyrion. I'm the marketing events senior intern for the WEL Institute. For those that aren't familiar with us, we are kind of, well, we're multifaceted, but we work with Kendra Scott LLC to provide empowering and equipping tools to the student body through a lot of different programming events, through our sponsored courses that we have each semester, and a lot of other cool opportunities. So we are guided by the voices of the Student Advisory Board and our Alumni Advisory Board to really just have a pulse on the student body and what they need from us and how we can support them. And it's a fantastic community of really cool, inspiring female entrepreneurs. So we are so happy to have you guys here today. And these are our fall courses. We have three. One is taught by Professor Kendra Scott herself and the fantastic Jan Ryan. Those applications depends on the course, but those end this week. So if you're still interested in applying, make sure you get those in. Some are available to only upperclassmen, and some are available to underclassmen as well. So. And then we also have a pitch competition this fall. It's going to be on October 20th. Applications for the pitch competition are due May 31st. You can find out all that information on our website. But it's super exciting. They're going to compete in 5 categories. And actually, this graphic's a little bit outdated, but now they're competing for over $50,000 in cash prizes. And we are super excited. They're going to pitch live on stage to a panel of judges, including Kendra Scott. It's going to be super cool. Okay, so awesome. If you're interested, we have info sessions. First one is tomorrow, and then more later this month, but you can find all that information on our website.
Yeah, so why don't Eva, feel free to drop the website link into the chat so folks can get in touch, and they can always ask you questions because you're hanging around and people can direct message you over Zoom. So I'll be really quick. The Launchpad, we're a program, the School of Undergraduate Studies. We're here to just help students of all backgrounds explore entrepreneurship in a way that is safe and inclusive. Our 3 main goals is really helping students find the right opportunities. So you can think of us as a Google Maps for all of the 50 to 75 plus entrepreneurship programs and resources and pitch competitions and certificates and minors on campus. We also build our own custom programming based on what student feedback looks like. And we are discipline agnostic, and we're here to serve everyone. And in addition to helping students explore entrepreneurship, we're here to help y'all cultivate an entrepreneur mindset. And that's a huge lens of this SHEspeaks series, but around cultivating entrepreneur mindset from a gender-informed perspective. We view students on this entrepreneur journey. So I believe most of you are probably early stage where you're interested in entrepreneurship, don't have an idea yet, but you're wanting to learn more. We also serve students who do have an idea, and we work on how can we help them leverage this idea as a vehicle for experiential learning. And then lastly, we also work with students who actually have companies with users in our revenue, and we help them find their next home, get media coverage, whatever that next step is. And we offer a whole suite of services from our physical co-working space that will hopefully be opening again the fall, mentorship, wayfinding and guidance. So stay connected with us. You can follow us on social media, or you just take a quick pic on your phone and sign up for a bi-weekly newsletter. It only goes out every 2 weeks, and we aggregate everything that's going on campus and beyond for you to get involved with and learn more. All right, and then for next Wednesday, if you're free, if you're available at this time, please come join our customer discovery conversation with Jan Ryan. I'm gonna go ahead and stop screen sharing and hand it over to Doreen.
Thank you, thank you. So this topic is about ideation. And I kind of thought, I had a bunch of conversations with Nina. It's like, okay, what can we do in an hour about ideation? And then I thought, I'm going to bring in a friend of mine, Umaimah Mendhro, who you see here, who's an incredible entrepreneur. Let me just give you 30 seconds of her bio. She's the founder and CEO of Vida, and that's a global e-commerce platform that connects designers and manufacturers around the world to create original products. But Vida was one of the first companies to launch high protection consumer PPE and has been recognized as the #1 best-selling mask. Now, this was last March, before anybody knew we were going to be wearing masks, which again puts into perspective somebody who not only has ideas, but takes those ideas and puts them into action. Umaimah was born in Pakistan, grew up in the Middle East, very little access to education. So education means a lot to her. She graduated from Cornell and then went on to Harvard Business School. And her business is a B corporation that gives back to the community, both in the form of meals on, giving back to food banks, but also educating factory workers that work on the product. So it's a really interesting model. Umaimah, I probably didn't do you justice, but I know when somebody reads my bio, I just go, no, stop. But look her up, look up the company, shopvida.com. It's truly amazing. But I want to talk, Umaimah and I talk about every other week, and we talk about the business a lot. And what I'm always blown away by is how her frame of how she takes ideas that are almost dissimilar, puts them together and executes them. So I wanted to try to unpack that a little bit. But I'm going to throw it out to all of you. How many of you think you're creative? Just raise your hands or put something in the chat. How many of you think you're creative and have ideas? Okay. How many of you don't think you're creative or worry about that? Is anybody who doesn't think they're creative here? Okay, not getting it. So here's what I have found. Ideas are plentiful, right? We have ideas every day. We cycle through, Vida, you says it depends on the environment. So I'd love to hear more about that. Because you are all creative. Everybody has ideas. Where it gets super interesting is, how do you take those ideas and turn them into actionable and something that's executional, like something that actually you can turn into something tangible that has meaning. And part of that is really understanding, and it's the principles that we use in design thinking, understanding insights, understanding people, understanding what people really want and really need without them even knowing what that means. Right? So the questions we always ask is, what is the problem you're really trying to solve for? Who is the problem you're trying to solve that for? And is that problem worth solving? That's what we're always looking at. So with that in mind, Umaimah, I'm going to ask you, I think you have pivoted Vida 4 times. What would you say, about 4 or 5 times?
Lost count.
Yeah. And kept it going. But part of it was you had a core idea. And do you want to describe a little bit what that core idea was? And then let's talk about the evolution and where you are. And by the way, we're going to open it up to questions and all sorts of things. So.
Yeah, thank you so much, Doreen, for that very kind intro. Doreen is just an inspiration for me. As she said, we spend, every 2 weeks or so, we connect, and, there's just such a wealth of information, and advice and wisdom that I get from her. But thank you, Doreen, for this. And I'm excited to share with you guys all, anything that I can share, anywhere that I can be helpful. Excited to have this conversation. The question of sort of, what was sort of the original idea? And I think Doreen is right, is that in many ways, I mean, that original idea is really, what is there even today, but it has taken a lot of different manifestations. And I see those as a reflection of the environment. It's actually the reflection of what is happening around us, so pivot is one way to think about it, but really it's, what is happening and how do we respond to that? So the original idea behind Vida was, I grew up, as Doreen said, with very little access to formal education. I was living in rural part of Pakistan, grew up in exile in Saudi. But I had a passion, one, for education, and two, for design and art and creativity, right? So the question of, are you creative? I like to think that, I enjoy making things and creating things. And I tried to establish my own line of sort of, products. It was fashion line. And what I saw very quickly was that it was really, really difficult to have a reasonably sized factory to take you seriously, right? To actually say, hey, can you make these products for me? Then trying to solve the problem of how am I going to show these products, to people who have the decision power to then present it to customers. So be it retailers, small boutiques, whatever it might be. So thinking of sort of the problem was that there was no starting point in my mind. There was no way to get that first foot in the door. So I actually said, this is too difficult. I can't do this, and then coming from a very humble background, I felt like, no, that's luxury. Like, I can't afford that. I have to go get a proper education. I got to be a doctor, an engineer. I'm coming from a Pakistani, family. So I ultimately, made my way to the US, did psychology CS and, Harvard and all that. And that idea of sort of, well, how do you go from actually an idea of creating something to actually creating something? That what Doreen was just talking about was my problem. How do I get people to help me create these things? So ultimately what I said is, I want to use technology to see if I can create a platform where creators can partner with makers and together we can make these products. And the cost of actually converting an idea into a product, that is the cost that we remove from the system, because what we do is we produce those products then on demand. So what the platform does, what Vida does, is we've built technology where a creative, a designer, an artist can design products, launch those products, customers purchase those products, and then we produce those products working with factories around the world on demand. So that's the core of Vida, and I'm sure we'll talk more about, the various iterations that we had to go through.
So it was an interesting idea. That was about 6 years ago. And in fact, I wore one of my Vida shirts today. The problem with working with Umaimah is you go to the site all the time and you just want to buy stuff. It's like it's a very bad thing. But anyway, you launched the platform and it got off the grounds, and you got, what do you have, like 50,000 artists on the platform? I mean, something crazy. And you started looking, and but what you realized too is a couple of things. One is, first you narrowed the product line, you just scarves, and then you had to widen the product line, right? And to understand it. And then you had to begin to group things together. And again, a lot of ideas. You are a prototyper by nature. So I want to talk a little bit about what that means, because you kind of de-risk things as you go through it. So talk about some of the ideas and some of the things that you did to test some stuff to see what direction things would go in. Because ladies, this is important, right? Before you launch the big disruptive idea, you got to test it.
Yeah.
100%. When you fail, when it's, when it doesn't work, when it's small, that's not as much as a big hit as when you fail when it's big.
Yeah, 100% agree with that. Yeah. And also just creativity in my mind, to me, yes, there is that idea, right? Is that idea, and then it's a creative idea. But to me, creativity is actually creating. Creativity is actually getting yourself in the other person's shoes, and getting outside of your bubble. I mean, that's where I start, and that is what gives me energy, and then ultimately confidence that there is something there. But so for that idea, when I said, okay, I want to solve this problem in some way, right? I want to connect the designers with the makers, with the customers. I needed to start to talk to, all three sides, right? So I just built a spreadsheet, a list of, just designers that I found online that I was like, I love your work. I want to try to talk to you. I wrote up a little email, while I didn't even have a company or, funding or anything. And I started to just kind of ask them for a Skype conversation. I was like, would you mind jumping on a call? And I want to learn more about your process. And, how do you get products made? What is your biggest problem? What's the biggest barrier? So I spoke with, maybe 20 or so designers. My list was about 300 or so, manually, entered, crafted. And then I went on a little tour of visiting factories. And at that time, I didn't even know what kind of factories I'm trying to visit. I knew it would be something, this is in apparel, right? So I'm like, okay, so these are garment factories, and I haven't worked with any of those factories that I visited because they were not the kind of factories that we could have worked with. But through that process, and having this idea that what I want to do is I want to simplify this process of going from an idea to a product, right? So I can't go, and try to just build any kind of product. Well, what kind of products can you do that with? Where can you do it where the designer could be anywhere? What form of information are we transferring to the factory? Like, I can't get, thousands of designers go visit the factory. So how do I streamline this process? How do I make it in a way that actually can be, ultimately scalable? So through that process is how we decided that, we want to kind of start with a specific kind of manufacturing, which is digital printing, which was basically, what was becoming commercial grade at that point was this ability for digital printers to print directly on fabric, just like you would print, on your inkjet printer in your office or your home. Similarly, large scale printers could print on fabric, and that was just becoming commercial grade. And so narrowing it down to that, which then ultimately meant we need visual artists. It's actually not fashion designers so much, because the scale is in prints. What we're offering is the ability to print visual art onto products, like the top Doreen is wearing, like the scarf you see in my background, the artwork that you see on my wall. Those are just print files that, artists have provided, and then, the factories. So that was sort of one of the things that we had to do in terms of learning through the process and saying, where do we start? What's the narrowing down that makes sense? The other one was, well, what product? Should we start with what? It's an open canvas. Where should we start? And we said, let's start with a scarf. What a scarf is a blank canvas. There's no sizing. It's a rectangle. You don't have to worry about anything. There's no cut and sew. So it was the simplest product to start. But we looked at, well, how large is that industry? How large is scarves as an industry? And it was a several $billion industry back then. There was no one brand that really owned that space, right? So there were a lot of these factors that we had to look at. Does that make sense as a entry product, for us to start with? And is it a practical product? Is that the one where, we can actually realize this idea, to its fullest without, like Doreen was saying, going out and trying to build an entire line at the outset. So reducing that risk, but really enough, right? It's sort of this question of MVP, minimally viable product, where, you want the core idea to be testable, right? It can't be so watered down that you didn't really get the feedback on your core idea, but it can't be, so big that you've invested so much in something that you never actually fully tested.
So I want to run back again. This is about ideation to coming up with ideas. How do you do it? Because again, everybody has ideas. You have to figure out. One of the things I heard you say is you went and you talked to a lot of people, both factories and designers, and you're trying to, and consumers, right? You're looking at the market and you're trying to piece this all together. So now I want to take this, now you get this going. You have an idea because you've gotten all these insights. Now you want to go fund this thing. Now, by the way, Umaimah's company is in the Bay Area, so you're very tied into the Silicon Valley world. So you go fund this. What happens when you go fund what you think is a tech company in a tech world, but they don't exactly treat you that way? So let's talk a little bit, because you had to then come up with really creative ways to think about getting this funded too.
Yeah, 100%. So what was interesting was that, I graduated from Harvard, and I will say that, for me, Harvard was kind of one of those places where I felt like I have to make my way in. Like, I don't actually just naturally belong there. I have to I don't know, it's not quite elbow in, but just more, I didn't feel like I necessarily just belonged there. I had to get in there and get into that network that had access. So I had that access, right, through Harvard. And so my grand plan was, I'm going to talk to, some of the folks who really know me, from my Harvard experience, and and share this idea with them. So I shared it with a friend of mine who had just joined Google Ventures, and he was very excited about it. He was like, this is awesome. This is a platform. We've been looking to invest in platform. Perfect timing. I think my firm would be very excited about it. And it was, it was really one conversation. He was like, we want to lead you around. So awesome. It sounded like, perfect start. So easy, done. They invested, I think it was a $250K check, right? And they gave us a really generous valuation, like, your company's worth $10 million. And then nobody followed. Nobody else came in. It was incredibly challenging. And you have Google Ventures as the name, they're behind you, right? They believe in this company. But we couldn't get, other investors to really come in and, fill out the round. We were looking to do a 1 million round. So it took a lot. I can't remember how many conversations we had, but I'm pretty sure if I had to kind of estimate, it would be like 1 out of 50 maybe were saying yes, right? So if you think about the amount of time and energy that takes, but really, through that process, you kind of see what does this mean? I think, I don't know, Doreen, how much we want to go into that at this point, but I do think that, it's important to think about, you have a creative idea. How are you going to fund this idea? And what is the best source for that? Which is not just the coolest source, or the source that everybody else is going after, but what is the right source for your idea? Long story, and then we can dive into it if it's of interest to anybody. But today we're fully team owned, so we've bought out all of our previous investors, and I couldn't be happier. It's a great place to be. But I do think that a little kind of what Doreen was hinting at is that yeah, it's a tech company, but we have products to move around. So it's not a kind of just you just. One day you're selling, one, and the next day you're selling 1 million. That can't happen. You need factories to be making those millions, right? So it's a different sort of way that you need to scale the company, and you need to understand how companies that have real physical goods, how do they really operate? But I think tech Silicon Valley doesn't. Might not be the best fit for something like that. But yeah, it was a challenge. It was a challenge to raise those rounds.
So I'm going to, because I want to, make sure we have time for the students to interact, because I love the group here, and just kind of talk again about ideation and coming up with ideas and managing them. But let's talk about where you are today and what you did last year to kind of once again totally change the trajectory of the company. Honestly, ladies, I just want you to know that when Umaimah called me up last March, it was right as things had closed down, and she said, I've got to get mask. And I was like, mask? Why are you getting mask? Like, well, you can't, I actually did not wrap my head around this at all at once until you kind of sat down and explained to me what was going to happen. Because again, you were looking at, I believe, the data, the documentation, kind of knew there was something there. What happens if you had masks that were good, but also fashionable? So talk a little bit about that process and then what happened as a result of that.
Yeah, I mean, I will say that what I remember is that Doreen was like, hey, if you believe in it, you got to do it. And that's what Doreen has been for me, like throughout this process. Like I don't think Vida would be where Vida is without Doreen. So just putting it out there. That's how it felt to me. She was like, if that's what you really believe in, you got to do it. So yeah, what was happening at that point in time is that we're on demand, right? So we have manufacturers in India, Turkey, China, and they are producing these products on demand only after the customer has made a purchase. And of course, if you all remember, right, like 1 year ago this time, each country was starting to shut down, right? So literally it was like we'd wake up and be like, okay, today Pakistan has shut down. Okay, now in a couple of days, India has shut down. So which means that we can't sell. Not that we cannot, like get our products made for inventory for next season. We cannot sell because we cannot produce those products because everything is on demand. So that was happening on the business side, right? That's kind of one thing that was happening. But then it felt to me as if it was like the personal side. The personal side, what I was seeing was this dire shortage of PPE, right? And it was just, it felt unbelievable to me that, we, in this country just simply could not get access to masks, protective masks, right? And at that time it was for healthcare professionals. We were not talking about consumers wearing masks. I remember I was driving somewhere and it was an NPR, talk and they were saying, we really don't recommend consumer, like everyday people to wear masks because you have to breathe in harder and you can actually. And I remember talking to my mother-in-law and I was like, no, don't wear masks because it's probably not safe. So, I mean, yeah, like just remembering, that time. So at that time it was like, how do we get masks for healthcare professionals? And what and I think the first idea I said to Doreen, I was like, hey, like, we know how to build platforms, we can get a group of people here, who can sew, and let's just start sewing masks because that's what we all need. But then what I realized really quickly is that need was being filled. So, it was, for instance, Joanne was working with, their customers, they were making masks in millions. And I would look at their counter and it would go from like 1 million, 2 million, 3 million. They were doing it at scale really fast, right? And it was, cloth masks. That's what, if you know how to sew, you can sew a cloth mask. Then you look at the need for N95s, right? The highly protective, and there's 3M, and 3M's got a, patent to it, and you can read up the patent. And I was reading up the patent. I was like, what's in there? How do we get that level of protection? So what I saw is that the need is, highly protective masks that we felt like consumers are going to need. And literally, I was thinking, they're doing this. We're probably going in a little bit too much detail, but my thought was they're doing this because they feel like there'll be a run, just like there was the run to toilet papers. Everybody's getting toilet papers. I was like, everybody's going to run for masks, and they don't want that. They want to save them for healthcare professionals. But every person is going to need masks. And if I built a model, and the model is what, like millions and millions of people will need masks. So it was literally like, if we could sell it at just a very accessible price point so that everybody who can afford it, like everybody should have a mask. And the market size is hundreds of millions, right? And so, what we said, okay, well, we know how to get products made really fast. We make them on demand, which means that, we were working with factories that would normally take 3 months to make an order. They were making, those things for us for 3 days, because we were on demand. We needed to get products out to customers, very quickly after they purchased. So we knew how to do really fast production. We also had a pretty large network of suppliers. So as all the factories were shutting down, China was opening up again. And we just kind of went and we said, this is what we want. We want this level of protection. We want to make sure it's this. And I know how to sew. So I was sewing. I was like waking up at 3 a.m., watching YouTube videos, sewing. Literally, there was a sewing machine right there. And I was just like, fabric everywhere. Because I was like, I don't think it should be this way. I think it should be this. The mask should fit snugly, because otherwise you're just breathing from the sides. And so, just all of that. And we said, this is the kind of mask we need. We need this level of protection. Where can we find it? And we made calls on Monday and we launched the product on Friday. And this was ahead of, CDC saying we should all wear masks. This was ahead of all of that, before, you could find any mask on Amazon. so yeah, moving fast definitely helped. And then just maybe again, kind of being in the shoes of, you know, I was wearing the mask that I was sewing, right? So being the customer yourself, I think makes a big difference.
And once again, pivoted, and now your customers are asking you again, once again, pivoting, we're going to go to mask. And it's interesting. Now you're listening to your customers going, we want more health stuff, which, and now you're looking again, you sent me this whole spreadsheet, ideation, how you're going to go after some things. It was very interesting. Now you're saying, okay, I'm listening to my customers and people, and we're going to go explore some other, so to be TBD, right, in terms of what's going to go on now.
Yeah. And one thing, Doreen, you said earlier really, you know, struck with me, which is, you know, when you ask customers what they want, right? And how do you, and I think what I've learned is that we do survey our customers a lot, right? And we would ask them, you know, do you like this product, like, and I think the way that I've learned to kind of, you know, think about that is that it's not the answer that is the answer. The answer that they give is not the answer. You know, it's the reason for that answer will give us guidance to an answer. You know, because we ask them, you know, are you going to buy masks for holidays? Like, are you going to gift masks? You know, very direct questions, right? Are you interested in buying, you know, antimicrobial bags? Are you interested? Their answer is not our answer, like the answer that we're looking for in terms of what the strategy should be. It's really understanding what they're thinking about, you know, what matters to them, what are their values, what are their fears, you know, what are they trying to really, why are they interested in something like this? That's where we can get our guidance for what we want to do. So, you know, just earlier when you said, you know, it's more than just kind of, you know, asking your customers. I think, you know, I don't think that will take, you know, that will get you to be truly innovative. Like, I don't think.
Right. It's observing and having those insights to really understand what's motivating people. And ladies, that's empathy. That's really understanding people at a level where you're saying, gee, okay, I see where they're coming from. I understand where they're coming from. And I think suspending your belief on what you think things are, right? That's the hardest thing, right? Because we have our convictions about what we think something should be. And I know you, Umaimah, you've had to do that constantly over these last 6 years, is what you thought it wasn't. And you've got to say, whoa, that's the direction.
Yeah, I love that feeling also, but it's very uncomfortable as well, right? Where you're like, I think this is gonna, you know, like, especially when you sometimes get it right, you're like, hey, yeah, like masks are gonna, you know, like at that, when customers are saying, no, NPR is saying you don't need masks. And we're like, no, I think they're gonna need masks. I think they're gonna need it. And we're gonna, you know, and then you get it right. You're like, yay, like I got some really cool insights. But then the next time it's like, no, that was not, you know, at all a good idea. So I think, yeah, suspending that. And I do think ego and creativity just are, they're oil and water. You know, I feel like that's kind of, it's just so counter, you know, to what you can do, you know, in terms of, I think a creative, the freedom to be creative, you know, you need the freedom to just let your ego kind of go out the door. I think that's super important.
That's hard. How did you learn how to do that?
I think I learned to enjoy it. I learned to enjoy it because you know, it's also even in conversations where, you know, I personally would say that now I love to say that is a much better idea than what I had. You know, and my team knows I say that a lot, and I love to say it. And it's like, yeah, mine was not a good idea. This is such a better idea. And then don't, you know, like, I was wrong, you are right. And it just, and, you know, once you say it a few times, it's not a hard thing to say. And you learn to enjoy it. I will say, you know, Harvard was a case study method, right? So the whole thing, the philosophy there, and I'm sure, you know, a lot of the students here probably, you know, have sort of that similar experience, but, you know, where you learn about a story, right? And then you're asked to take a position. You're like, okay, if you were the CEO, what would you do? And you say, this is what I'm going to do. And you're like, this is the right way to go. And then you start listening to other ideas, and you hear another idea, and you're like, actually, that's a great idea. The learning, in my mind, the true learning happens when you started with a very strong conviction of how you think it should be done. And then you see that the other idea actually sounds a lot more sound. So if you didn't have that conviction to begin with, I think that learning is not as internalized. If you were just observing it, oh, okay, there's this way to do it, and then there's this way to do it. Ah, interesting, right? Versus you're like, no, there's this way to do it. And then you're like, oh, wait a second, I didn't even think about that. So I think that moment is actually kind of magical when you have a position and you learn that there is a better position. I think it's like in a moment you just grow, right? It's like if growth spurts could happen in moments, that's the growth spurt moment. And I love it now because I'm like,
and that doesn't mean that you're weak because you've changed your position, right? I mean, that actually is like a power, that's like a position of strength, being able to do that.
Exactly. Yeah. And if you can experience it as a growth spurt, right? Like, wouldn't we all just want to like, overnight become smarter? So I'm like, oh my God, like I overnight learn something that, and yeah, I think it's also good to start with a position and allow yourself to be, corrected, but really sort of, get smarter about that position. Because yeah, passion is important. So passionate about one position, but then being open about, the other, I think is fun way to live a life.
All right. I want to see if any of the students, anybody have a comment or question you want to address? Thought? Concern?
I thought the story was super inspirational, and I just had like a quick question. You guys kind of touched on it, but with people getting vaccinated and stuff like that, and the need for masks going down possibly in the future, are you going to focus on new things other than masks and try to transition that?
Yeah. So that's what Doreen was mentioning as far as the spreadsheet and, because yeah, I think it's another moment for us where, and it's not just now, the day we launched Mask and we saw the uptake, which was just, crazy uptake, right? We knew, that's not gonna stay, this doesn't mean suddenly we're now, worth 100x more than what we were, or 100x more revenue, which is what we were doing. And what I've been telling my team is that on the one hand, it's like, we want to be the company that is fast in responding to the needs of the time, right? So in our minds, Mask was fast in responding to the needs of the time. So what are the needs of the times now? Because that's kind of what I mean by, it's not pivoting, it's just, well, what can we do now that is the most valuable, to people today? So that's kind of what, what our process is messy and structured both, but, our process is we look at sort of from an industry perspective, okay, what are these sort of, as Doreen was saying, our customers are expecting from us really stylish, sustainable, kind of comfortable, but then also very credible products, with health benefits, right? That, yeah, if you say that this has UVF 50, it's going to protect me from sun exposure, that it actually has that as an example, right? So, but then, what we say is, okay, what are those products where there is that white space opportunity, where something is missing, maybe there's no stylish products at all, maybe the price is too high. Can we, how big is the demand? Is the demand growing? Is the demand declining? Those are the things that we look at almost as a, it's almost sort of, if we were to invest in a company, where would we invest? So that's kind of the lens we take. And to the point of, Doreen and I have talked about, well, some of these products healthcare professionals need, and they're going to continue to need. So I was looking at scrubs, and this weekend I spent my weekend wearing scrubs, like just the whole day I was wearing scrubs, because I'm like, let's just see, are they comfortable? Can I like stand in them? Because I'm mostly sitting on weekdays. I'm like, let me walk around. Let me just like do a day in the life of scrubs, so it's a lot of experimentation, numbers, living in the shoes, talking to people. I've talked to so many healthcare professionals, talking to so many customers that, surveyed so many of our customers, so a lot of learning. And then I will say the other big thing is that what we feel is that there's no experimentation that can that can be at the level of actually just putting it out there. So no matter how many surveys we do, how many people we talk to, industry experience, the best that, the most sort of useful way to experiment is to put it out there in the market and just see, how people respond to. So that's what we look to do, is very quickly get things out, and based on the response, we take the next steps.
Is there another question? I always have a question for it, but is there anybody else want to ask another question?
Yeah, I'm just curious, are there certain products that lend themselves very well to having that on-demand production? And are you going to try and like compound on those or have better margins there? Or what does that kind of look like?
So just specifically, if we take the perspective of on demand, and then what are those products? I mean, one way to kind of think about it is just what are the technologies that are possible, right, at commercial grade where you can do on demand. So when it comes to, that, then there's the digital printing. What it does is traditional screen printing was you would, there's a lot of capital investment in creating these large scale screens, and then you use them to, so you want to recoup your costs. So digital printing just changed all of that. Similarly, 3D printing is similar in that way, in that, you can do really fast production, like you don't need to invest a lot in creating molds, and, you can just 3D print the item. Similarly, there's laser cutting. So that question, I would say in particular, I think of it from the perspective of what is possible for on-demand production. Then maybe like from a customer's perspective, like is on-demand something that we do onshore, offshore? How long would it take? What are the kinds of products where customers would wait that long if it is something that takes long? So, a little bit of a capabilities and a sort of market, lens is how I would think about that.
Great, thank you so much.
Yeah.
I'll throw in another question. What do you think if you had to leave the students with one or two things, what do you think is most important about how do they harness, to me, this is everybody's creative, everybody's got ideas. How do you harness that? What are some of the things you think are really important? You've obviously told your story, but you've now, you've got a lot of years behind you, and there's been some more stories there. So what do you think are a couple of the most important things for the students?
Yeah, I think if you have an idea, right? If you have sort of an idea, I would say getting outside of your bubble is where I would start. Meaning that, I would just look at that idea from a lot of different perspectives. I would go talk to people and be like, I think this is something that is exciting. What do you think? Or get feedback on that from who might be customers, get feedback from who might be partners, who you might need as suppliers, right? So getting that feedback. But then I also like to mix, I think it's important to mix the data side to the sort of the intuitive, qualitative side. Is that, okay, well, how many people, have this problem? Kind of going back to Doreen's, 3 things, like who has this problem? What is this problem? Is this a big opportunity? If you want to go solve a big problem, then how many people have this problem? So I think it's a little bit of going out and then kind of coming in a way, like, make sure you're connected, don't get too tied up in the idea. Like, I think sometimes, I feel like I see people where they get really passionate about something. It's almost like before you get really passionate about it, that's the time where you want to really authentically just poke holes at it, really look at it from a lot of different perspectives, and don't take forever to do that. Give yourself some time. I would say, okay, I'm going to take 1 month to really poke at this. Doreen knows there's another idea that I'm working with that I'm like, okay, I'm going to give it, time to poke at it from so many different directions. But then after that, I'm going to jump in, or decide not to do it, but I'm not going to just keep poking at it, because you do have to take that first step. And a lot of the times that first step is the hardest step to take. So then take that first step, because kind of going back to what I was saying, I would say that there's no learning, as good as the one that you can get if you're actually out with that idea. You don't want to stay just in your head with that idea. So yeah, poke at it for 30 days, and then just if you're gonna go for it, then go for it. It's gonna feel scary, and all of that, and you'll still have a million questions, and you're not gonna answer 95% of those questions. So then just get started, just go for it. keep learning, along the way.
So there's no absolutes. I mean, that's what we're saying here, right? It's not like you take A and B and this is how you ideate and this is how things happen. There's what I hear you saying, you've got to go out there and try. You've got to take all this information and you've got to go out there and try and learn from trying. And when you find out things are different than you thought they were, you have to adjust, right?
Yeah, I think that's so critical, right? And you see sort of even large companies, right? That sort of the classic Blockbuster Netflix example, right? Where it's like, no, who's going to do DVDs, right? Or you just kind of, the Fujifilm and, digital cameras and, those kinds of ideas where it's like, the world changes around you and you don't, respond to it. That's sure shot way to just not continue with your creativity and doing well.
I mean, one of the things that I've always found really amazing about you have weirdly no fear about talking to anybody. You will go out and talk to, but that's a really important skill, right? You'll just pick, it's like, I don't care who they were. Like you'll go out and you talk to people, but that I think has just been such a great source of just on the ground information from people. And, you've been able to learn a lot. And I say this again with everybody here is because people are afraid to talk to people and you shouldn't be, because that's where you're going to learn from.
Yeah, I think curiosity. I've come to believe that curiosity is not getting its due credit. I feel like it's so powerful to just start with being curious, and I think talking to people, just kind of out of curiosity, just to learn, and I mean, I feel like majority of people, for everything that they know, they're willing to share that, right? If you just kind of want to have a chat with them to get their perspectives on things, there's no ask, there's, that's the best way to ask something, for their kind of perspectives. And going in with just this sort of true curiosity, I think curiosity actually gives you confidence, because it's not, you don't come from, oh, I have this idea and I want someone to validate it. It's a very different place to be, which is where the point about, like before you get really passionate about it, that's when you want to propose. Like, don't look for people just to validate it. You can find people to validate if that's all you need, but that doesn't help you. Like, go when you're actually curious and be actually curious. And yeah, I totally agree that, I do feel like I've had this, sort of, it comes from this idea of like, I'm curious, like what this person would say about this. I remember like at Harvard, it was, I watched a documentary on Ralph Nader, just a random example, but, and I was like, that's a very interesting life story. And I was like, I would love to talk to him, and I'd love to write a case study on him. And Harvard was not interested in like a political case study. And I was like, I'm just interested in understanding like, his life story. And I was like, how do I get to him? Like, how do I ask someone? And I was like asking around professors if somebody knows him. And then I was just found a number on his website and I just started calling that number. And every day, every couple of days, I'll just kind of leave a voicemail. Hi, it's this Umaimah. I'm just, hoping to talk to Ralph Nader. And then one day I'm like having lunch, at Harvard and it's like, hi, is this Miss Mendhro? This is Ralph Nader. And I was like, hi. So I think, yeah, it's like, you just reach out, and there's really no harm. And it's again, when you live with that kind of curiosity, I just think life is short, it's fun to learn. It's fun to kind of just go out there, and you believe in an idea, go for it, go try it out.
Okay, that is my new favorite story. So I'm going to like repeat that story. That is I didn't know that about you. That's my new favorite story. Like you called Ralph Nader and so it like picks up, calls you back. I love it. And it did. That's great. Anybody else have questions for you, Umaimah? Tap that brain. Don't go, don't miss this opportunity. Anybody else have questions for?
Yeah, I have a question. What single piece of advice would you give your, let's say, 21-year-old self, your undergraduate college age self?
I think I was not confident enough. like, I feel like I've feared too much. I think I feared failure quite a bit. Even though I would say my story in my head was that, oh no, like, you know, when I fail, I just get up and, you know, like I turn failures into success. And, you know, like if I work hard at anything, I can do it. You know, that was my internal sort of dialogue with myself. So it was very positive. You know, it was a very sort of, you know, very, very kind of positive kind of a way of looking at the world. At the same time, I think I was really afraid to take that first step and fail. And I felt that I needed to gain a little bit more experience, you know, like just even when I was graduating from Harvard, you know, this is graduate school, right? There was so many of my colleagues who just, you know, straight up started a company, and I wanted to start a company. Like I always wanted to start a company, but I felt like, you know, like, am I ready for it? Am I not? I don't, you know, I feel like if we talk about stereotypes, then I do think that's a bit of a female stereotype, right? Where we just don't, you know, there's a lot of self-criticism or just, you know, just kind of this things that we allow to get in our way. So I think I would want to be a little bit more fearless, you know, as a 20-something-year-old, and just take those chances. I think, you know, in a smart way, right? Kind of figure out like, okay, what happens if you don't do well? You know, you can plan it out, you can manage those risks, but not take the step at all or prolong it for a very long time, you know, not need it. Because if I look back at like a lot of others who went for it, you know, maybe, you know, like didn't necessarily have so much more experience than me or knowledge than me, right? Yeah. So that would be a missed opportunity.
Related second question, I think some students will probably have this too. Was there a specific moment when you're like, okay, I'm afraid, but I'm still going to do this? Or like, what got you over that hump of, you know, feeling a little bit vulnerable, even though the dialogue you were having yourself was like positive, right?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was much later, right? So, but I think it was kind of, I don't know how much of it is applicable, because for me, it was a little bit of a kind of how things shaped, is that it was actually, I was on my maternity leave. You know, it was my second child. You get a break. I think what is good, what is the relevant point here to take away is actually when you're just on this wheel, right? And you just keep, you don't pause to take inventory of where you're at and is this what you want to do? You know, I think that maternity leave for me was a forced pause. And I was in a role kind of, you know, pre-maternity leave, like the job that I was in, I felt like I couldn't, I had a lot of ideas for what we wanted to do, and I just wasn't empowered, you know, to do that. So I felt like I don't really want to go back to that. I don't feel empowered to, you know, like do what I want to do. But I will say, I think it was the forced pause that, you know, makes you kind of just even taking the time to question and say, hey, is this the path I want to be on? And I've learned a lot from that. You know, I certainly now do that, you know, where I'm like, okay, hold on, time out. You know, is this what we want to do? Right. So I think that pause allows you to do that. As far as, you know, kind of even this idea that, okay, I'm still nervous, but do I do it? I think it was just like, okay, it's enough. Enough is enough. I'm just going to do it. You know, like, yeah, I think I was kind of gradually reaching that point where I was realizing that I'm, you know, perhaps a little bit more capable than what I'm giving myself credit for.
A lot more capable than what you give yourself credit for. Do we have any final questions for Umaimah, or about ideation or creativity or feeling secure? I mean, I don't know how you ever feel secure in your ideas. You just, at some point, after getting the information, I like to talk about de-risking ideas by understanding people, by understanding how they're going to be used and where they're going to be used, and listening. You begin to de-risk the ideas. They're not as frightening anymore because you're getting all that feedback. Where it gets hairy, and I can tell you from my, you know, previous life when I worked in, you know, innovation consulting for so many years, and we would tell people, that's not the answer because this is the feedback we're getting, and they didn't want to listen. And they would dig into it, and, you know, they would hit a wall. Like you talked about Fuji. I remember sitting up in in Kodak land up in Rochester, New York, with a bunch of Kodak executives. And we were talking about the future of digital and what they could do. And one guy who had been there for 40 years looked at me and he said, because we were talking about taking pictures on your iPhone. Again, this was years ago. And he said, but those aren't good pictures. People aren't going to want to use that. And we're like, no, you don't understand. People just want to like capture their kid's birthday party. They don't have that discerning eye. And he said, nah, they would never do that. And he got up and he walked out of the room. Wow. And I thought, oh my God, they're going to, I just thought it there. I go, they're not going to make it. And they didn't. I mean, it was so shocking to me, because you're like, thousands of people are just like taking pictures with their iPhones and using this stuff. And it's like, they just want to capture the moment. How are you going to help them do that? They didn't want to buy it. They wanted professional grade, and everybody's got to buy this equipment, and people are still going to use film. And you're like, whoa, this is not going to go well. So they love it. All right, Umaimah, any closing comments, your words of wisdom you want to leave with?
I kind of have a million questions for Doreen, because I feel like you have so much, Doreen. I'm going to actually turn it. I'm going to make sure we don't waste this opportunity to ask Doreen for final words of wisdom.
Okay, well, thank you. Here's what I think. You're all here because you are curious and you want to do something. And you're thinking about, or you are, and you're taking that step. So part of this is you have ideas, which is great. Listen to some of the words of wisdom that were imparted today, which is go out and understand people. I think the biggest problem I've ever seen, it's kind of like Kodak story I just told you, was people not really understanding the intended audience and who the customer is. Understand that person. And then incorporate those learnings back into your ideas, and call it pivoting, call it changing, call it whatever you want. Your idea is going to change and morph. Ideas are living and breathing, and they're kind of going to evolve, and let that happen. Nothing. I love to say, don't be precious. I used to tell the designers that all the time. Please don't be precious. Like, don't do that, because if you allow the evolution of your ideas, you will stay forever. And companies like Vida that we admire always almost cannibalize what they had before to get to the next thing. And that's a really, really good lesson to learn. So you're all here for a reason. You have your idea, you've started your company. Listen to some of this, go out and really understand, and don't be afraid to go do that. So that's my parting wisdom here. Nina, anything we should say?
No, I hope that you all enjoyed the SHEspeaks experience. Please, can we just get some +1s in the chat to express our gratitude for, these two wonderful women, for their time and their wisdom. And I hope that we get to see you next week as well. All right.
Thanks, everybody.
Right. You're welcome.
Thank you so much for taking the time. I know your day is crazy for doing this, helping the students. We appreciate it. All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.